That nice, smooth bottom besides doing squats, but squats are recommended. Hello you dirty potters, how are you today? Today we're going to talk about trimming, and most likely you just created your first bowl, your first cup, your first jar even, and you want to learn how to make that really nice foot on the bottom of your bowls. Trimming a foot at the bottom of your bowl and or cup really allows to make sure that the bottom of your vessel is nice and even, and it gets rid of some of that surface tension whenever you're putting it on grandma's table and she won't be like, "Why you put stuff on my table? You're messing up my table." Not only that, it's really just the proper thing to do with functional stuff. I think any potter who's been around the block a couple times will tell you the first thing they do whenever they pick up a bowl or go to an art show is they pick it up, they turn it over, and they see the quality on the bottom. The places that you take care of that people can't see immediately is it really sets you apart from being a crafter versus an artist. And how well you trim the bottom of your vessels really shows how much care you take into the places that people can't see, and that's how much work you've really put into your stuff. So today we're going to go over trimming, and I'm going to give you a couple tips along the way to tell you how to get that nice, smooth bottom besides doing squats, but squats are recommended. First of all, let's get this subject out of the way right now. Now if you're just beginning and you're learning how to trim, do not try and trim your stuff as soon as it comes off the wheel, please, and it's all wet and tacky. This right here is considered wet clay. See, just comes apart, but you can still technically trim it, and I'm sure there's going to be somebody in your class who's like, I could totally do it. No, you can't. There are stages to clay, and you need to trim them in the proper stages, you rebel. You need to make sure you can handle them without morphing the entire body first. If this thing was an actual vessel and I tried to handle it in my hand, I'd probably mess it up. Look how easy it is to smush it around. If you pick your bowl or cup up off the wheel and it starts moving around because it's still too wet, that's not trimmable stuff. But if you pick it up and you can move it around and slap it around without it actually doing anything, this is trimmable. With that being said, there are different stages to clay. This right here is considered wet. This is tacky, this has a little bit more water content in it. It still technically sticks to my hands. If I try and move it around, it doesn't fall off too easily. This right here is not trimmable. And when you throw your stuff and take it immediately off the wheel and don't wait for it to dry for a little while, it's considered wet clay still. Don't trim that, put it down. This right here is considered leather soft. The reason this is considered leather soft is because it's good enough to hold, but still I can technically move it a little bit, you see? But look, I can still hold the majority of the bowl without messing it up. There's only certain weak spots and places that I can touch that mess it up. This is the thing that makes it leather soft. There's still a little bit more water content in this than some leather stuff. Leather soft. Imagine that you picked up a bowl and it was fine and you touched the top and it morphed. That's because it's not completely leather dry yet. Get out of my way, Susan. And then there's the leather stage. The leather stage is where the high majority of people like to trim their stuff, and you can always tell the leather stage because it's still a little bit difficult to handle, but you can still take off and morph a lot of stuff from this. Look, I can just tear off a chunk of this stuff if I feel like it. It's not that hard. That's damn near impossible to do in the leather hard stage. I prefer to trim my stuff in the leather stage. It feels just like a leather belt, and it's a little bit difficult to explain to you what that feels like because I'm not there with you passing around an example around class like your teacher's probably doing, like, "Oh guys, this is the leather stage, and this is the leather hard stage." So I can't give you a tactile definition of what it feels like, but I can say it feels a little bit like a leather belt. For your first time, I highly suggest you trim your stuff in this stage. Now these two bowls right here are considered leather hard. There's nothing I can do to these to morph them at all. These things are already set in their ways. They're leather hard. I'm not moving them. But if you look on the inside, you can see that it's starting to turn a little bit white. That white color, especially with white clay, is what happens to clay whenever it dries out completely. So I have a little bit of time to actually trim this. If you see these signs right here inside your stuff, you need to get trimming. Stop sitting around and playing on your phone. I see you back there. Well, technically I can even drop this and nothing would happen to it. It would stay in form. This thing is leather hard. And if I try and pull off any clay, it's really not happening. I can morph it a little bit, I can maybe sculpt it a tiny bit, but it's a lot harder to move than it would be leather or leather soft. And then there is the dreaded bone dry clay. You only want this when you're done trimming the bottom of your bowl. If you have not finished trimming the bottom of your bowl and it is in this stage, you are boned. And if you can tell, these two are actually the same exact clay, but there's a large difference. You see how this one's a lot darker than this one is? This one is devoid of all of its water. It's naturally dried out over time. This right here sounds like this. This one still has a little bit of water content in it, and you can really tell from the sound. Versus this. Sounds a lot more brittle. That's because it is. That's because it doesn't have any water in it. If you ever get to this stage, you should not get to this stage in the first place. So there's wet clay, there's leather soft clay, there's leather clay, which you should be trimming in this stage really, and then there's leather hard clay. This is when you really have your last chance to trim that stuff. Once it gets to bone dry, Mr. Powers. But Donte, can I put water on this and then it'll become wet like this one again, right? And then all of a sudden I can magically trim my stuff within a course of 5 minutes? No, you can't, because do you know what happens when you leave this stuff in water for too long? This is what would happen. Your stuff would turn into this crud right here. That's right, this used to be this thing's brother, and now I'm forcing him to stare at him. No, my brother. I meet a lot of students who think they can take their bone dry stuff and just dip it in water and leave it there until it becomes something else again. You can't really take this and put it back into its former self. You have to keep your stuff wet enough and wrap it up well enough to make sure that you can trim it in a timely manner. Keeping a timely schedule in between when you threw your clay, how fast it takes to dry, and when you're able to trim it is a very important thing, especially in ceramic artwork. So don't let it get to this stage before you actually trim it. Now let's talk about some of the tools of trimming. Most likely you got a package that had a couple tools that look like this, or at least one trim tool. You know that weird trim tool with the square on this side, and then it's a stick, and it's a loop-de-loop on the other side. It's fine to use that too, but I don't have those because I hate those. But I do want to get this point out of the way. I have learned to use like 15 different trim tools, and these are my favorite ones. There is no one trim tool to rule them all. There are only different varieties of trim tools for every single person who wants to use different trim tools. So please don't feel discouraged whenever someone's like, nope, don't use that one. Don't use that one. Only use the one your teacher told you to. So any tool that you want to use is fine, but today we're going to be using the pear-shaped trim tool. And the reason we're going to be doing this is because you most likely got this tool inside of your package, or that weird square one. There are a bunch of trim tools in the world, but today we're going to be using this one right here. This one right here is called a pear trim tool. It's called that because, I mean, look at it. So let's go over to the wheel and let's figure out how to use one of these. First things first, let's learn how to center. Let's say you're not that one kid in the class for some reason knows how to do everything perfectly, and you really don't know how to center your bowl when you trim it. I'm going to show you the way I was taught to do it, and then I'm going to show you the way I do it. This bowl at the moment is not centered. So what you're going to do is you're going to get your pencil, and you're going to rest your wrist on this thing right here, and just let it go. And barely touch your clay. 1, 2, 3. Now do you see this mark right here? What you're gonna do is you're gonna put your hand on this mark and push it towards the center of your wheel. And you can tell the center because there's these lines usually on a wheel. If you don't have them, follow the same rules. You just push it towards the center. Now it's a little bit more centered, so go ahead and get your pencil and do it one more time. Touch, touch, touch. You see that? This is a much bigger line now. So now, just push it towards the center. The entire point of this is to get this pencil and make sure there's a line all the way around this. Once you get into the center, you're gonna see a line form all the way around, just like this. This is the way I was taught how to center my stuff. And by the way, I'm using a pencil and not a pin tool because the pin tool will dig into your clay and scratch it and you're gonna mess up your bowl. But at least with a pencil, you can simply wipe this off right here and it comes off with enough pressure. Each and every time you don't get a complete circle from your pencil, go ahead, take it, and push it or pull it into the center a tiny bit more. Sooner or later, you're gonna get a line, and then you're gonna get like one spot that's open, and just go ahead and just tap it a little bit. And once you get a line all the way around your bowl, that is now centered. Now here's the way I like to do it. Go ahead, put your bowl way off center, and slowly start spinning your wheel. Now if you're right-handed, you're here, and if you're left-handed, you're right here. But either way, once this bowl comes towards any one of your hands, go ahead and smack it towards the center of your wheel. And the more centered it gets, the more little smacks you're gonna start doing. So smack, 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 center smack. It's gonna take a while to get that down, so I suggest you do the pencil way first. But after you get tired of doing this for 500 years, go ahead and try that tap center method. So once your stuff is centered, go ahead and get yourself a little ball of clay. Make sure it's good clay. It's not going to be gross, hard clay. You want to use some pretty okay clay. Put your hand at the very top of your bowl and start putting clay wedges right in between the wheel and the bowl itself. This is a key note though. Make sure you don't push into your bowl. Make sure you're pushing down. If you push downwards, the clay is going to morph onto your bowl anyway because this space is going to move outwards. You don't want to be that guy who's like, and then you take it off and your rim's all morphed and you got what you deserved. Just gently kind of push it down on the wheel itself. Tear off, spin the wheel, put it down over here, tear off, spin the wheel, put it down over here, and you should be good. Something I like to do whenever I really don't trust those little battens down here is I'll take my hand and I'll just push them down a little bit more on the edge, just like this. I'm pretty sure this doesn't help me at all, but it honestly gives me some peace of mind, so I don't mind. And after you do it like this, you can spin your wheel as fast as you want and nothing will come off. Amazing! Remember that pencil that you had from earlier? You're still gonna need that. A lot of the trouble that happens with students is they never figure out where to put their foot, and the foot can't be too small and it can't be too big. What I want you to do is I want you to get your pencil right here and go ahead and mark out where you think your foot's gonna be. You're gonna draw two different lines, and in between those lines is gonna be your foot. So if you want your foot way out here, you're gonna make a line right here, and you're gonna make another line right here. Everything outside of this line, you're gonna trim away, and everything inside this line, you're also gonna trim away. Anything that is within these two lines, you're gonna keep. So that means if you wanted to make a foot super small, you would take one pencil mark right here, and one right here, and this space right here would be your foot, but clearly that's way too small for a cup and or bowl. You want something that's actually gonna hold its own weight on a table when you eat from it and not gonna spill over and then the dog's drinking it and the cat's afraid of you now. It's an awful experience. You see this cup right here? I made this cup like 5 years ago and it has the tiniest foot, and now it can't stand on anything. Nobody uses it in the house. Look at this. You just push it over once and it just dies. That's why you don't want a small foot. So now that we've already drawn the lines for our bowl, what we're going to do now is we're going to trim everything on the inside of it and on the outside. So I'm going to show you guys the way that I learned, and then I'm going to show you guys the way I do it as per usual. Go ahead, get your pear trim tool, the one that literally looks like a little pear, and take this big side right here. Put your hand on the very top and make constant pressure. Constant pressure means that you're not doing this. As it spins, you're not putting this amount of pressure, and then this amount of pressure, and then this amount of pressure. What you're doing is you're putting one constant amount of pressure. This is what you need to be doing to this bowl. Hold your trim tool just like this, and just push down with this finger right here. Just like this. And keep doing that same amount of pressure, no matter what happens. Be warned, if you trim bone dry clay with your tool enough times, it will unsharpen it. You will either have to buy a new tool or resharpen it. It will ruin your tools. And go ahead and keep pushing down just like this until you get a deep enough foot that you actually want. Okay, cool, that side's done. Now, flip your pear trim tool over and use this tiny part right here. Hold your trim tool just like this and start on the inside and pull towards this direction and stop right outside that line right there. Now you're gonna keep doing this over and over and over again until you get a deep enough foot. And this is one of the reasons I like to use pear trim tools, because if I'm going cheat mode, I'm just gonna lay this sucker down flat and spin. And now I have an entire surface that I'm just gonna take off. See, I just did that entire surface in the matter of like 3 seconds. The one thing you need to remember is to have constant pressure. If you don't have constant pressure and you push a little pressure and you take it off and push a little pressure and take it off because you're too afraid or you're frightened you're gonna mess up the bowl, that's the thing that's gonna mess up the bowl. If you are afraid to keep trimming your stuff and you don't keep that constant pressure, you're gonna create unwanted bumps and trim marks inside your stuff, and then you're gonna have a really messed up bowl. It's not gonna sit flat anywhere. Potter tip! Sometimes the inside of this little circle right here makes glaze run, so what I like to do is I like to get a little bit more trim and make a tiny little line on the inside there. Because trust and believe me, when you're done glazing your very first bowl, it might run, and this will stop it from running on the inside. Just like if you make a little line on the outside of your pot at the very base of the foot right here, this will kind of prevent a lot of glaze from running. And this doesn't make it stop 100%, but it lessens the chances a lot. So we've trimmed the outside right here, and we've trimmed the inside. We trimmed everything on the outside of those lines. This is going pretty good. But you think you're done? Oh no, you're not done. Get off Instagram, you're not done. Go ahead and take your sponge or whatever have you. Some people have lambskin, some people have a chamois, and make a little arc with it. And go ahead and push this part down right here. These two little edges are most likely going to be really sharp after you're done trimming because you just trim them with essentially a tiny knife. So go ahead and get a sponge, make a little arc, and just push down these two little edges right here. And keep that constant pressure. And I've just rounded out these edges. And when it's done coming out of the kiln, it's not gonna cut your hand when you try to hold it from the bottom and get it out the cabinet. And I know you're gonna try and give this to your grandma or your mom because you're not keeping your own artwork, right? So, I mean, unless you really wanna cut your mom. And now you are essentially done. But there's one more move left. You are almost done. All you have to do now is take this off of the wheel without messing it up. A lot of people at this point will get their fingers and try and roly-poly this part off right here. Don't do that. Don't worry about that. Go ahead, get your wooden knife, put it next to, but not on, the actual bowl itself by the trim. Do not touch this with your bowl. Just put it down on the wheel next to it and spin your wheel. And these things will come off automatically. That way you could pick up your bowl without morphing the very top. And you have done it. You have trimmed your very first bowl. I think a little round of congratulations is get off Instagram. Get off Instagram. Pay attention. And you've done it. You've made your very first bowl. And you know what? The very bottom is super smooth because we're not savages and we didn't leave it all sharp. And I still have one more bowl to trim right here, so for the hell of it, let's do this one more time, but we're gonna do it a little faster. But pay attention because we're about to do everything we just talked about. And once you're done trimming, if you really want to, you can make some little decorations in here with the trim tool by itself. One of my favorite things to do is put 3 concentric lines at the very bottom of my bowl. It makes it look really nice and uplifted. I put one line right here. I put another line right here. And then put the third line. Always remember to sign the bottom of your bowl because somebody will get desperate who doesn't pass class and try and steal this junk. And you also have to make sure your clearance level is good too. What I mean by clearance level is the amount of depth you've got while trimming the inside of your bowl, and the outside for that fact. I like to get my wooden knife right here and put it right here. And if I can see through that space right there, that's a good indicator for me, right there. I can see right through that. So that's deep enough for me. Because when you start glazing this stuff, you're gonna take a sponge and you're gonna wipe this entire foot off. You're gonna end up leaving the glaze on the inside and on the very outside of your bowl. And the glaze does move in the kiln. It will drip off and fuse to the kiln shelf. And believe you me, this will stick to my kiln shelf if it's not glazed properly and you don't wipe off all the glaze. And I will break your bowl and not count it as a passing grade before I don't save my kiln shelf. My kiln shelf is probably worth a lot more than your pick of a bowl. And there you go, you have trimmed your very first 2 bowls. I think you deserve a tiny round of it. Get back to work. No applause, get back to work. So it's really that simple, it's not too hard. One of the very few things that I think a lot of people don't understand is that you can't pull away. Whenever you start trimming something, you need to keep a constant amount of pressure, just like when you're throwing. I'm sure you guys noticed you're getting better at cylinders the more pressure you continuously put as you pull up, and you really need to do that with trimming as well, because if you start to pull away, you're gonna get some nasty lines just like this on your pottery. But if you don't pull away, you're gonna get that nice smoothness just like this. Oh yeah. Don't forget, you don't have to paint everything on or make everything look nice with glaze. You can always put a nice layer of trim inside of any of your bowls with your trim tool. It can also be used as aesthetic purposes. And them's the basics of how to trim a bowl. So thank you guys very much for joining me. I really hope that helps some of you new potters out there learn how to trim. One of the most consistent problems that I see whenever people trim is that you have to keep constant pressure and you have to have the right kind of clay to trim. If you're trying to trim something that's super dry, it's not gonna work. Super soft, you're gonna create holes in your pottery. So you really have to make sure that you have that nice leather medium stuff. So thank you guys very much for joining me. I really hope that helped some of you new potters learn how to trim, and I really hoped that helped you pass your class if that's why you're watching this video. And I tried to keep this clean for anybody who wants to show their class. I mean, we'll figure that out in the editing, really. If you want to see any of my artwork, the links are down below. My Instagram, my Facebook fan page, where you can always message me and ask me questions, or you can just look at some pretty art. And I will see you dirty potters next week. I do realize there's a certain amount of people out there who want to know how deep they should go. I mean, you already know how deep.